Then thinking about who is connected to your ideal client, more and more really refining. That first quarter, it's sort of like a big, like, let's just see what works. Let's throw spaghetti at the wall. Quarters 2 and 3 is really saying, okay, what's working here? And what's the 20% that's giving me 80% of the results? There was a pastor when I moved back to town that he gave me probably 6 to 10 couples or families a year. And I was networking with a bunch of pastors, but he was the one that did it. So who did I develop the relationship more with? It was that pastor. We'd have breakfast once a quarter together and just talk life. So he knew who I was as a person. And then, he would refer to me. All right. So at that point, 15 clients or so per week minimum, you're at $90 a session, really staying conservative with that. So over those months, that's 32,400. I'm basing this on a 48-week year so that you can have 4 weeks off also, just for those numbers. And then in that last quarter for your first year, you're going to want to think about, should I start adding clinicians? So if we think about Brian, who is saying, I'm full, I quadrupled my caseload, best month ever. Like, he's going to want to start to think, okay, after 7 months, I'm pretty much where I want to be. And I would actually say when you're at like 70% full, that's when you want to start looking at adding clinicians, if that's a goal of yours. For many of you, that's not. And so we might want to look at other streams of income like podcasts or e-courses or books or speaking or things like that. Then you're going to want to start looking at interviewing people and mirroring your branding of your practice. And so in your practice, saying, okay, so far I've been known for helping couples. Who are we getting referred to that we're turning away? Why are we turning those people away? Do we want to have a clinician that can potentially help there? So in my practice, I had an attorney that referred to me a bunch, but she wanted some custody assessments for divorces. And I didn't want to do that work. I could do that work. I didn't want to do that work. So my next hire, guess what it was? It was a psychologist that did custody evaluations, because people were driving 2 hours south to Grand Rapids to be able to get these custody evaluations. So finding those people that your referral sources are asking for, looking at all those different areas, and then looking at how do you take hats off. In that middle column, I didn't say VA, so virtual assistant, looking to have a virtual assistant that can start to answer your phones, that can check your email, that can follow up on scheduling, they can really do those things. Because if you're doing all of that, that's going to limit the amount of clinical time that you can do. And so in that last quarter, looking at how do I take off hats? Why am I doing the accounting? Why am I doing the bookkeeping? Is that something I can outsource much cheaper? Because typically you can outsource it. And then if you can go do counseling, it's going to be a lot easier. So you're starting to build that business instead of you doing everything. At this point, minimum being at 20 clients per week, maybe we give you a raise to $100 per session. You're looking at $2,000 a week. And, if you had a W-2 or 1099 that was seeing even just 6 people a week, maybe they just work 2 evenings a week at $90 and you get 50% of that, that's an extra $270 a week. So in those final months, we're looking at $27,240. And then for a total with that year, very, very conservative, of $66,840. We're going to look at a few other factors to consider with this just as kind of a baseline. Let's look at some of the expenses. So for your rent, not knowing your market, it may be higher, maybe lower than this. If we had a budget of $1,500 a month to rent an office, that's $18,000 a year. Your EHR, your G Suite, internet, phones, liability insurance, an accountant, attorney, all through these things. Office drinks, I recommend having a little refrigerator with fancy, nice little drinks like, Starbucks or, LaCroix or coconut water, something like that. And then just having some discretionary money. That'd be about $30,000 in expenses for a full-time or more than full-time practice. Now, 18 grand of this is rent. So if you go telehealth, that's going to save you a ton of money. But how do you decide your rate? So let's walk through a few ways that you can decide your rate if you're not going to take insurance. If you take insurance, insurance tells you your rate. You can try to negotiate it. In some markets that works, in other markets it doesn't work. So start with your lifestyle. So look at the salary that you want to make, plus the taxes you would have to pay, and then your cost of business. So say you want to take home $80,000, your taxes will be about $24,000 or so. You want to talk to an accountant to get a better idea of that. And then our previous slide of $30,000, that means $134,000 needed for that lifestyle. Now, if we then look at how many weeks we want to work, say we want to take a month off a year, then we would just divide out that 134 by the number of weeks. So that means $2,792 per week. And if we say, well, how many sessions do I want to work in a week? Some people may say, you know what? I'm a highly sensitive person and I need to only work 12 hours a week. Okay, great. We do this based on 12. Some people, they're a workhorse. They just want to do 30 sessions a week. Okay, great. And so we just run the numbers for yourself. You can always adjust it and say, oh, that's like really a lot per session. That's like $900 a session. That's not going to work. Okay, maybe you need to work more than 3 hours a week. And so then just running, is this even reasonable? So with those numbers, if you're going to work 20 sessions a week, that means you need to average 139.58 per session. And so if we go back to those quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, you'd want to base it on 139.58 a session instead of that $90 per session. All right. And Dana, if questions come through, feel free to just jump in if there's a slide where people have questions. Another way is you decide your rate by just starting with the going rate. Look at what insurance and private pay is in your area. So typically 125 to 175, and start charging that and raise it as you go.
Hey,
so
Joe,
this is, yeah.
There is a question that says, isn't it also based on what others are charging?
Yeah, well, there we go. It's like they knew what our next slide was. So yeah, so that's another way to look at it, to look at what other people are charging. Now, I started at $70 a session. I said that at the beginning. Now, when I ended up selling my practice, I was at $225 per session, and the average in Traverse City was still, for private pay, $90 per session. So there is often a false assumption that you have to stick around what your people in your area are charging. Now, I would actually argue that when you're at about 60 to 70% full, that's when you need to raise your rate again by a substantial amount, by $25 to $35 per hour, to make a big jump, because you're getting close to being full. And so it's a great opportunity to be able to raise your rates again. And so if you're at 125, to jump to 150, to jump to 175, 195, it'll give you a heart attack. Like, we do this all the time in Next Level Practice in our What's Working, where people say, I'm full, I have a waiting list, I don't want to hire clinicians. And I say, well, then raise your rates. And they're like, no, I can't raise my rates. And I say, well, okay, let's walk through this. You're already turning these people away. Why not give them the opportunity to say yes for a higher rate? And so oftentimes we see people climb very quickly with their rates, which I would recommend whether or not you do the first exercise or this one. I would love to know in the chat, how else have you decided your rate? So it may be through insurance, and maybe through looking at people around you, maybe looking at your lifestyle. Are there other ideas that you have that we can share with other folks? And we'll read some of those once we get through the rest of these slides. So there is money on the table, though. So imagine you're doing 20 sessions. Maybe you want to then have a clinician that's in your office. So Monday through Thursday, say 3 to 7, you're done. You want to be done at 3. That's 4 sessions a day times 4 days. That could be 16 extra sessions if they're on the hour. Plus, you could also do them on the 45 minutes of the hour. You could also then have someone on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's easily 25 sessions there. So we're looking at 41 extra sessions that you wouldn't be working, that even if they were just charging $90 per session and you got 50% of that times 48 weeks, that's an extra $88,000 per year. And so imagine if that rate was $125 a session. Imagine if they worked 50 weeks a year. Imagine if, even it was like 20 sessions a week. There's extra money on the table that you could be making there. So here's a couple of ways to keep costs down. So we looked at that $30,000 a year as just a baseline. I would say start with telehealth. I mean, telehealth is so convenient for people. They don't have to find childcare. Their kid can be in the iPad in the other room. It can be such an easier way to get started. You can also do this as a side gig. You can do a counseling practice as a side gig, as just like a Monday night. You're going to just start seeing people. You're going to slowly build it. You can take much bigger risks when this is a side gig, when you have your full-time job. Build your own website, do your own marketing, wear multiple hats. You could only invest in the essentials, like forming a company, getting your website going, your liability insurance, and then adding billing software later if you end up taking insurance. You can use your own phone and your own internet to keep costs down. You can find a shared workspace where you only use it when you need it. Obviously, you want confidential. You don't want one of those like hipster ones with all the glass windows and stuff where everyone's going to see all your clients. But find a shared workspace where you can use it only when you need it, and learn from others who have done this before you. One of our folks in Next Level Practice, Lauren, posted this right after her ideal client had come to their first appointment. And she said that moment when your ideal client walks out of their first session and you realize your marketing is working and that your ideal client is awesome. I mean, this was one of those GIFs of like the little girl going like, yes, yes, yes. I mean, that's what we want. We want to have a business that we love, that feels fun. And we need people like you to thrive in private practice. We need more dedicated private practice owners that are in it to grow a practice, to lift up our communities. One question I asked myself when I left my full-time job is, would I rather try and fail or never know? Because it was such a hard decision. I was the only income earner in my family. My daughters had had heart issues. I had just come off of the heels of cancer treatment. And to be like, okay, I have great health care. Like, do I want to make this risk? But I kept saying to myself, like, would I rather try to jump and do private practice full time and just see if I have it in me and maybe fail and have to go find another job? Or would I rather never know? And for me, it was like, I would rather try and see what I have in me. And then lastly, think about the multiplication for your community. So imagine you now see, 20 more people a week. That's 20 more folks that are getting mental health access than did before you started your practice. Imagine you hire some clinicians and you build a small group practice. And over time, they're each seeing 20 people. Now 100 people in your community have access to mental health care. There's a multiplication effect. And then also if you're hiring virtual assistants locally, if you're hiring accountants locally, that impacts your community in a way that's different than if you just stayed in your full-time job.